Close your eyes for just 1 second and imagine a small, stone-walled kitchen in Nazareth. The sun has barely crested the hills of Galilee. The air smells of wood smoke, dried herbs, and something warm simmering over an open flame. And standing at the heart of that kitchen, hands dusted with flour, is a woman whose love for her son was unlike any love the world had ever seen. That woman is Mary. And the boy she is feeding, the child she is nourishing with every meal, every herb pinched between her fingers, every loaf pulled from the fire, is Jesus of Nazareth. What did she feed him? What ingredients did she reach for before dawn? What flavors shaped the palate of the Son of God? These are questions the church has rarely thought to ask. But they matter more than you might think, because the food Mary cooked was not just food. It was sacred nourishment. It was ancient wisdom, encoded in grain and oil and seed. And today, in a world drowning in processed ingredients and synthetic flavors, that wisdom is almost completely lost. If you have never thought about what Jesus ate, what his mother set before him on a simple clay plate, day after day, then what you are about to discover is going to change the way you see, not just Scripture, but the plate in front of you. And if this kind of deep, faith-rooted exploration speaks to you, if you want to keep uncovering the hidden, human details of Jesus' life that most people never think about, please subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button, because the content we are building here is not like anything else you will find. Every single video is crafted to bring you closer to Jesus in a real, human, everyday way. Do not miss a single one. Subscribe now. Now, let us step into Mary's kitchen, not as tourists, as guests. To truly understand what Mary cooked, you have to first understand the world she lived in. First century Galilee was not a land of abundance in the modern sense. There were no grocery stores, no refrigerators, no industrial ovens baking bread 3 states away. Everything that reached Mary's table came from the land around her, from the hands of her community, or from the small garden she tended herself. And that constraint, that beautiful, demanding limitation, forced the people of her time into a relationship with food that was profoundly intimate, profoundly intentional, and, as science is now beginning to tell us, profoundly healthy. Galilee was agriculturally fertile. The region was known for its olive groves, its wheat and barley fields, its fig trees, and its access to the Sea of Galilee, which meant fresh fish was never far away. The Jewish dietary laws, which Mary kept faithfully, also shaped the kitchen in ways that were surprisingly health-forward. Clean meats, specific preparation methods, careful separation of certain food groups. These rules were not just ceremonial. They resulted in a diet that modern nutritionists would largely applaud. And here's the first thing that should make you pause. The very foods that nutritional science now calls superfoods: olive oil, legumes, whole grains, fermented foods, fresh herbs, fish. These were not trendy discoveries. They were the ordinary, daily staples of a Jewish family in first-century Galilee. They were what Mary knew. They were what she passed on. They were what fed Jesus as a child and as a man. Let's start with bread, because bread was everything. In Mary's household, bread was not a side item. It was the foundation of nearly every meal. The word for bread in Hebrew, lechem, is so central to the idea of sustenance that it appears throughout the Old Testament as a synonym for food itself. When Jesus later teaches his disciples to pray and says, "Give us this day our daily bread," he is drawing on a deeply personal reality, because he had watched Mary pray over bread his entire life. But the bread Mary made was nothing like the soft, bleached white bread most of us grew up eating. Her bread was made from whole, emmer, wheat, or barley, ancient grains with a completely different nutritional profile than refined modern wheat. These ancient grains were dense with fiber, complex carbohydrates, and trace minerals. They digested slowly, keeping energy stable for hours. Scientists studying the Mediterranean diet have found that communities who still eat whole, minimally processed ancient grains show dramatically lower rates of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and chronic inflammation. The bread Mary baked was, in every measurable sense, medicine. Throughout much of the year, Mary would have made leavened loaves using a naturally fermented starter, what we would today call sourdough. And sourdough is one of the most nutritionally sophisticated forms of bread ever created. The long fermentation process breaks down phytic acid, a compound in grains that actually blocks mineral absorption. By fermenting the dough, Mary was making those grains far more digestible and far more nutritious. Every loaf pulled from that stone hearth delivered more iron, more zinc, more magnesium, and more B vitamins than the same bread baked without fermentation. She fed Jesus this bread every single day. She ground the grain herself, often in the early morning hours, before the world was fully awake. There is something deeply moving about this, that the hands of the woman chosen to raise the Son of God began each day in that kind of quiet, faithful labor. Then there is olive oil. If bread was the foundation of Mary's kitchen, olive oil was its soul. Galilee was famous for its olive groves, and olive oil was far more than a cooking ingredient in the ancient world. It was currency. It was medicine. It was used in religious ceremony and in anointing rituals throughout the Hebrew scriptures. In the books of the prophets, oil is consistently associated with blessing, abundance, and divine favor. For Mary, reaching for a ceramic vessel of olive oil was not just a culinary act, it was a sacred one. The science behind olive oil is staggering in its alignment with what ancient tradition already knew. Extra virgin olive oil is rich in oleocanthal, a compound that research has shown acts as a natural anti-inflammatory, functioning similarly to ibuprofen, but without the side effects. It is loaded with polyphenols that protect the cardiovascular system, slow cognitive aging, and reduce oxidative stress at the cellular level. The Mediterranean diet, built on a foundation of olive oil, is the most thoroughly studied dietary pattern in the world, and it is consistently associated with longer life, lower dementia rates, reduced cancer risk, and better emotional health. Mary poured this oil on bread, cooked her lentils in it, dressed her vegetables with it, and the boy who grew up on this oil grew into a man of extraordinary clarity, compassion, and spiritual power. Think about that for a moment. We spend so much time asking theological questions about Jesus, but we almost never ask the quieter, more intimate question: what was he like to live with? What was he like at the table? If the food he ate from childhood shaped even the human side of his nature, his physical vitality, his mental sharpness, his emotional groundedness, then Mary's kitchen becomes one of the most important places in the entire gospel story. Now let us talk about lentils, because lentils may be the most underappreciated food in all of Scripture. They appear famously in the story of Esau and Jacob in the book of Genesis, chapter 25, when Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew. That is how valuable lentils were, so warming, so satisfying, so deeply comforting that a man would trade his inheritance for a single bowl. Mary made lentil stew herself, week after week, year after year. Lentils were a cornerstone protein source in first century Galilee. They are packed with plant-based protein, soluble fiber, iron, folate, and B vitamins. They have a very low glycemic index, meaning they release their energy slowly, preventing the blood sugar spikes that come with modern processed foods. A bowl of Mary's lentil stew, simmered with onions, cumin, garlic, and olive oil, would have sustained Jesus through a full day of work in Joseph's carpentry shop. That kind of food does not just feed the body, it steadies the mind. It creates, over years of consistent eating, a biological resilience that is almost impossible to build on a modern diet of refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed ingredients. The herbs Mary used in her cooking deserve their own deep attention, because the herbalists of ancient Galilee knew things about plant medicine that we are still trying to recover. Hyssop was used both in cooking and in ritual purification. It appears in the Psalms and even in the account of the crucifixion itself, where someone lifts a sponge soaked in sour wine on a hyssop branch. Modern research has confirmed that hyssop contains flavonoids and terpenoids with genuine antibacterial and antiviral activity. Mary would have bundled it into stews, pressed it into bread dough, and hung it to dry on the wall of her home. Coriander was another herb central to the Jewish kitchen, and its presence in the Torah is not accidental. When God describes manna in the book of Exodus, he describes it as looking like coriander seed. Coriander is anti-inflammatory, digestive, and rich in antioxidants. It calms the gut, supports liver function, and contains compounds shown to lower blood sugar levels. Cumin was equally essential. In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, Jesus references the Pharisees' careful tithing of mint, dill, and cumin, tiny seeds measured with religious precision. Jesus knew what cumin was. He tasted it every week in his mother's food, and cumin stimulates digestive enzymes, increases the bioavailability of nutrients in other foods, supports the immune system, and contains thymoquinone, a compound with demonstrated anti-cancer properties in laboratory studies. Every time Mary stirred cumin into a pot of lentils, she was enhancing not just the flavor, but the nutritional depth of everything in that pot. Fish. Let us talk about fish, because this is where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Jesus grew up not far from the Sea of Galilee, a freshwater lake teeming with life. His earliest disciples were fishermen. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were all men who smelled of fish and salt water when Jesus first called them. Fish was not an occasional meal in first-century Galilee. It was a regular, expected part of the diet. The fish of the Sea of Galilee, particularly the species now commonly called St. Peter's fish, would have been eaten fresh, dried, and salted, and Mary would have prepared it in all of these forms. Fresh fish is one of the most nutrient-dense foods available to any human being. It is rich in high-quality complete protein, meaning it contains all the essential amino acids the body needs for tissue repair, hormone production, and neurological function. The fish of Galilee also provided omega-3 fatty acids, which are critical for brain health, cardiovascular health, and the reduction of systemic inflammation. Omega-3 deficiency is now strongly linked to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline conditions that are epidemic in the modern world, but were rare in communities that ate whole fish several times a week. When Mary served Jesus grilled fish for dinner, she was feeding not just his stomach, but his brain chemistry. The physical body that would carry the weight of the world was, in part, built from the fish of Galilee. And then there are figs. If bread was the foundation and olive oil was the soul of Mary's kitchen, figs were its quiet poetry. Fig trees grew everywhere in Galilee, producing 2 harvests a year. Fresh figs are sweet and lush. Dried figs could be pressed into cakes and stored for months, providing energy throughout the winter when fresh produce was scarce. Figs appear throughout the Hebrew scriptures as a symbol of peace, prosperity, and divine blessing. In the first book of Kings, when Solomon's kingdom is at its height, the writer describes every man sitting under his own vine and his own fig tree, the image of a good life, a secure life, a life touched by God's abundance. Mary would have given Jesus figs the way modern mothers give children fruit from a bowl on the counter, simply, naturally, without fanfare. And figs are nutritionally remarkable, high in dietary fiber, rich in calcium, potassium, and magnesium, and loaded with polyphenols that function as antioxidants throughout the body. Pomegranates, too, were part of Mary's world, and they deserve more than a passing mention. The pomegranate is one of the most ancient fruits in Jewish tradition. It appears on the hem of the high priest's robe in the book of Exodus. It is celebrated in the Song of Solomon. It decorated the capitals of the columns of Solomon's temple. In Jewish tradition, the pomegranate was said to contain 613 seeds, one for each of the commandments in the Torah. The symbolism tells you how deeply this fruit was woven into the spiritual fabric of Jewish life. And pomegranate, as modern science has discovered, is one of the most antioxidant-rich foods on Earth. Its juice contains 3 times the antioxidant activity of red wine or green tea. Punicalagins, compounds unique to pomegranate, have been shown to reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, and support joint health. The pomegranate that Mary might have pressed into juice on a warm Galilean afternoon was, in measurable terms, one of the most powerful natural health tonics available to any human being at any point in history. Let us take a moment to step back from the individual ingredients and see the whole picture. Because what you are beginning to understand is that the diet Mary fed Jesus was not primitive or limited. It was extraordinary. It was whole. It was, by almost every measure of modern nutritional science, optimal. And it was not designed by a team of scientists or a celebrity nutritionist. It was designed by God, embedded in the land of Galilee, encoded in the dietary laws of the Torah, and practiced by a faithful Jewish woman in a small stone house in Nazareth. Mary did not know the word polyphenol. She did not study the glycemic index. She did not read peer-reviewed journals about gut microbiome health. But she cooked with wisdom, inherited wisdom, community wisdom, spiritual wisdom that produced outcomes that modern science is only now beginning to understand. There is a profound theological point hidden in this. When God chose to enter the world as a human being, he did not choose to be born into extraordinary wealth or royal abundance. He chose the simple, whole, land-connected diet of a working-class Jewish family in first-century Galilee. And that choice, that deliberate embrace of simple, wholesome food, is itself a kind of revelation. Jesus ate what the land offered. He ate what his mother prepared with her own hands. He ate in community, at table, in fellowship. And the health of his human body, the physical vessel through which God's love would be expressed in the world, was built on that foundation. Fermented dairy also played a meaningful role in Mary's household. The Jewish dietary laws meant that dairy and meat appeared at separate times, but dairy itself was a regular presence. Goat's milk was the most common dairy source in first-century Galilee, typically consumed as fresh milk, as soft cheese, or as a fermented yogurt-like product called lebanon. Goat's milk is easier to digest than cow's milk. Its protein structure is closer to human milk, and the fermented forms provided a significant source of probiotic bacteria, feeding a gut ecosystem that supported immunity, mood, and cognitive function. When Mary placed a bowl of fresh goat's cheese beside bread at the morning meal, she was nourishing Jesus' microbiome in ways that modern, pasteurized, processed dairy products simply cannot replicate. There is something beautiful and slightly heartbreaking about comparing that morning table, the stone bowl of lebanon, the rough-hewn bread, the clay vessel of olive oil, the cup of water drawn fresh from the local well, to the average breakfast table in the modern world. Cereals loaded with synthetic vitamins and sugar, processed orange juice stripped of its fiber, white toast made from flour, so refined it delivers almost nothing of nutritional value. The contrast is not just nutritional, it is spiritual. Mary's table was alive. Everything on it had come from a living thing, handled by living hands, cooked over a living fire. The modern breakfast table is, in many homes, almost entirely industrialized, almost entirely dead. Consider what Jesus himself says in the Gospel of John, chapter 6, when he calls himself the bread of life. He is drawing on the most primary symbol of nourishment in his entire culture: bread, real bread, made by human hands, from whole grain, baked in a living fire. He is saying, I am the thing that truly feeds you, not the hollow imitation of food, the real thing. And perhaps there is a quieter echo of that truth in the way Mary fed him. She always gave him the real thing. Grain porridge was almost certainly a staple of Mary's morning meals. Barley or emmer wheat, cracked or ground roughly, simmered in water with a pinch of salt, finished with olive oil, or wild honey. This was the breakfast of first-century Galilee, not glamorous, but deeply sustaining. Barley, in particular, is one of the most nutritionally complete grains ever eaten by human beings. It has the highest fiber content of any grain, including beta-glucan fiber, which clinical studies have shown to lower LDL cholesterol, slow glucose absorption, and feed beneficial bacteria in the gut microbiome. Jesus almost certainly began many of his days, the days on which he would walk miles, preach for hours, and carry the emotional weight of the world's suffering, with a bowl of barley porridge, sweetened with wild honey. Raw honey deserves its own moment here. Before antibiotics existed, raw honey was one of the most effective wound treatments available. It contains hydrogen peroxide and phenolic compounds with proven antibacterial properties. As a food, it provided warmth, comfort, and slow-releasing energy. In the Hebrew scriptures, honey is the taste of the promised land itself, the very flavor of God's provision. Mary sweetening Jesus' morning porridge with a spoonful of raw wild honey is one of the most quietly tender images I can picture. That small, ordinary act of care. The Son of God, both hands wrapped around a warm clay bowl, tasting sweetness. Wine also had a quiet, consistent presence at Mary's table, though always in a context of moderation and blessing. The Jewish tradition has never been one of abstinence from wine. Wine was a gift, an essential part of the Passover Seder, a symbol of joy and covenant. The first miracle Jesus performs in the Gospel of John, chapter 2, is turning water into wine at the wedding in Cana, and the Gospel tells us his mother is the one who prompts him to act. Mary clearly had no theological objection to wine. She served it. She expected it at a celebration. The wine of first-century Galilee would have been a naturally fermented, low-alcohol product made from the local grape harvest, rich in resveratrol and other polyphenolic compounds that research now links to cardiovascular protection and longevity. The moderate, food-paired consumption of wine that Mary and her contemporaries practiced is one of the most replicated findings in nutritional science when researchers try to explain why Mediterranean populations with relatively high fat intake show strikingly low rates of heart disease. Now let us speak honestly about what was absent from Mary's kitchen. There was no refined sugar, no high fructose corn syrup, no bleached white flour, no hydrogenated vegetable oil, no artificial preservatives, no synthetic colorings, no flavor enhancers designed to keep processed food shelf-stable for 2 years. Every single one of those things absent from Mary's kitchen is something that modern nutritional research has linked with increasingly strong consensus to the epidemic of chronic disease that afflicts the modern world. Obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, inflammatory bowel conditions, certain cancers, depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's disease. All of these have nutritional correlates with the industrialized food system. All of them were either unknown or dramatically rarer in the populations of first-century Galilee. The absence is not coincidental. The absence is the message. We are not meant to be living the way we are living. Our bodies were not designed for the food we are eating. And the diet that Mary prepared for Jesus every single day is, in many ways, a map back to the way we were created to eat. Not because ancient automatically means better, not because we should romanticize poverty or ignore genuine advances in food safety, but because the specific foods and patterns that made up Mary's daily cooking, the whole grains, the legumes, the olive oil, the fresh herbs, the fish, the fermented foods, the seasonal fruits, these are not cultural relics. They are biological truths. They fed human beings for thousands of years, and abandoning them, as the modern world largely has cost us something precious. In the Gospel of Luke, chapter 4, Jesus stands in the synagogue of Nazareth and reads from the scroll of Isaiah. "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor." The word anointed in Hebrew Meshiach, in Greek Christos, literally means rubbed with oil, olive oil. Jesus is declaring himself the Anointed One while standing in the town where he grew up eating olive oil every single day of his life. In the most embodied, most physical sense possible, olive oil was not just a food in Jesus' world. It was woven through his very identity, and Mary cooked with it every morning without perhaps fully grasping what it symbolized in the life of the child she was nourishing. Let us also think about the rhythm of meals in Mary's home, because that rhythm itself was a kind of wisdom. There were no 3 square meals separated by processed snacks and coffee. The pattern of eating in first-century Galilee was shaped by daylight, by labor, and by the liturgical calendar. The first meal of the day was light the grain porridge, bread with olive oil, something from the dairy jar, fresh or dried fruit. Then came the work of the day. A small midday break brought bread, olives, a handful of dried figs, perhaps some salted fish eaten standing in the shade. The main meal came in the evening, after the day's work was done, eaten together slowly in the warmth of lamplight and conversation. This was when the lentil stew appeared on the table, or a grilled fish, or a bean and herb dish fragrant with cumin and coriander. This pattern light in the morning, small at midday, fuller in the evening, aligns remarkably closely with what modern chronobiological research suggests is optimal for human metabolic health. Jesus ate this way for 30 years before his public ministry began. His body was not shaped by convenience or comfort. It was built for endurance. Mary's faithfulness in the kitchen was not separate from her faithfulness in prayer. In that world, they were the same thing. To grind the grain was to pray. To tend the fire was to worship. To set the table was to honor the God who had given everything on it. When Gabriel visits Mary in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, and she responds with those magnificent words of surrender, "I am the Lord's servant. May your word to me be fulfilled." She is not just giving her body over to the miraculous. She is giving her hands, her daily work, her early mornings, her kitchen. All of it becomes part of the story of salvation. Every meal she cooked was an act of faith. Every dish she set before her son was a form of devotion. And I want to give you one final image, because I think it might be the one that stays with you longest. In the Gospel of John, chapter 21, after the resurrection, Jesus appears to his disciples on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. They have been fishing all night and caught nothing. He calls to them from the shore, tells them to cast the net on the other side, and suddenly the net is so full they can barely haul it in. And when they come to shore, they find Jesus has already lit a charcoal fire, and he is cooking fish. He says, "Come and have breakfast," and he gives them bread and fish. The resurrected Lord, the one who has conquered death, the one who holds all authority in heaven and on earth. And what does he do on the morning after his disciples recognize him risen? He cooks for them. He feeds them. He grills fish over an open fire on a beach by the Sea of Galilee and invites them to sit down and eat. He learned that from his mother. He learned that food is love. He learned that the act of preparing something for another person, of taking simple, good ingredients and turning them into nourishment, and then placing it in front of someone you care about, is one of the most Christ-like things a human being can do. Mary taught him that in a small stone kitchen in Nazareth, one meal at a time, over 30 years, what would it mean for you to eat a little more, the way Mary fed Jesus? What would it mean to replace a few of the processed, industrialized things on your plate with something slower, something simpler, something more whole, not as a diet, not as a trend, but as a kind of reverence? A small daily act of alignment with the wisdom that was woven into creation from the very beginning. The wisdom that a faithful woman in Galilee practiced without fanfare, feeding the Son of God with her own hands every single day for 30 years. You already know more about what Mary cooked than most Christians will ever think to ask. And now you know it means more than food. It means love made edible. It means divine wisdom embodied in daily life. It means that your kitchen is not a mundane place. It is a sacred one. If this opens something in you today, leave a comment below. I genuinely want to hear what moved you most. Like this video if it blessed you. Share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe so you never miss what is coming next. God bless you. And may every meal you eat today carry just a little of the love that Mary poured into hers.